Hey there, welcome to episode 71 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, a Nevada nonprofit, 501c3 public charity working on civic volunteerism, changing the world. Today we're recording this episode on June 25, 2024, during another super hot week here in Southern Nevada. Doing it inside this time, as usual. Today's episode, Elephants at Year End, is a mix of two things going on, which I will get to. Hopefully, wherever you find your audio programs, you're able to see the episode description in which I place the show notes, a quick summary, and the links, the website links that are associated with the topic or topics of the day, which I've done. So let's get started. Today's episode will probably be not too long. It's pretty quick topics, but interesting. It's one of those things that you know, but then you rediscover that you know. So let's get started with the summary, which I will read to you almost as written. I usually improvise a little bit. Summary of today's episode: as we continue efforts to reach out beyond our locality, while at the same time pursuing our high-priority internal projects, the elephant in the room, so to speak, is the difference in the way we all evaluate what is before us. And our fiscal year ends on Sunday. Whatever sort of celebration you choose to engage in, we're jumping up and down for joy. This week's links are the three that I've been posting in recent weeks. A link to our website. I did an episode on the order of operations, which was a discussion about internal versus externally perceived priorities, project priorities, and so on. So our website looks exactly the same because the external priorities are taking a slight lead and getting more attention lately. Two of those we'll get to today. InnovateForVegas.org. That is Innovate for F-O-R, Vegas, no spaces or dashes. InnovateForVegas.org. It's right there in the show notes, in the link section. Our GitHub org, we have an organization with GitHub, and as a 501c3 nonprofit, we get the Teams tier for free, so that's nice of them. GitHub.com/InnovateForVegas. Once again, F-O-R, Innovate for Vegas. Project Act also has a GitHub organization. That is just a project. So it's right now it's part of Innovate for Vegas. We could probably be a fiscal sponsor if needed. Right now it's merely a point of collaboration. Ideally, we'll have some other people join in and contribute to the tools and methods and so on. That's basically what we're talking about today. I have two links that might be useful. One is a Wikipedia link to the parable of the blind men and an elephant, which we'll get to. I've talked about this before. It's something that we all experience. It's not bad. It's just that we need to know when it's going on. And one of the things that might help that was a fun game, which I will talk about. I have linked to it. It's very difficult to find an article or a main website. I know Amazon sells some card games. There are various learning institutions that have articles. There's a GitHub project to implement an online version. I'm not sure. I didn't really try it, so I didn't want to link to that. So we start with a link to the University of Michigan website on, they have it in equitable teaching. It's a game called Barnga, B-A-R-N-G-A, Barnga. And I will describe that game. I played it, or I experienced playing it with a group of people in a leadership Sunnyvale class. So I'll get to that. And very interesting, but basically goes very well with the blind man and the elephant parable. So we'll get to that. First, it is the end of our fiscal year. I've covered this before. We're finishing up our second fiscal year, which actually ends this Sunday. So this is the final podcast of our second fiscal year. We can begin year 3 come Monday. Very exciting. The main, the main business item is our filing of the annual list. The annual list is a list of our directors, our governance. for our nonprofit. We need to file that by the 30th, midnight, I think, with the Nevada Secretary of State. And of course, our annual tax filing, which we will do the 990EZ again, or sometimes called the postcard. It's actually filed online, so it's not even a postcard anymore. We are a very simple organization. I believe the first year we had $150 in donations. This year, I think we have about 40. Luckily, our costs are essentially zero. So during the early years, we can focus on developing the sorts of things that we're going to talk about today, sort of, but there are a variety of things. The nature of civic volunteer organizations, the fact that Code for America pulled the rug out from the brigade program, a lack of some general awareness at the community level, depends on where you are, whether you're going to interact with city government, agencies, staff, different organizations, non-government organizations, et cetera, et cetera. Those interfaces may be new. Here in Vegas, very difficult to establish any sort of anything with locally. We'll just say locally. And so I do know that Clark County had an agreement with Code for America proper, the actual Code for America, to work on sealing cannabis conviction records as part of state legislation, I think. I don't know the details of that, but I do know they had an agreement. So that it was easier for the county to make arrangements with Code for America as a nationally known entity than to work with people locally. So that's sort of an uphill climb that needs to be faced. I'm sure others in other places face something similar, especially if you're a new organization, as we are, second year. And so, there's always a challenge. And then our final board meeting of our second fiscal year will be held this week on Thursday. We always hold those on the fourth Thursday of each month during our regularly scheduled Thursday office hours, which are weekly. Our board meetings are open to the public unless there's some sort of private business. Then we would just conduct that separately. We'll finalize our new director seats. I believe, I don't want to speak too soon, but I believe we have one person joining to take the place of one person leaving, which I've talked about previously. So our board remains small, 3 people, but again, we're still in our formative years. A lot of new things, a lot of things to figure out in a place like Greater Vegas, the Southern Nevada area. So we'll add that director. Ideally, we'll add 2 more directors in the coming weeks, months, years, who knows. But 5 feels like a better number than 3 for what we're trying to accomplish. We'll ratify our new bylaws and some other business items, and then on with the next year. Baranga. No, it's not Baranga. It's Baranga. It looks like it should be Baranga. Baranga is a weird word. I don't know its origins. That's an exercise left to the listener. Baranga. I first played this as during a cultural awareness day. When I was taking the Leadership Sunnyvale program in Silicon Valley. So one of the Saturday items on the syllabus was all day. We talked about cultural awareness, cultural, cross-cultural, interactions, etc. So put simply, Baranga, you commence playing Baranga by not talking, no talking. So you're not allowed to really communicate. This simulates language differences, or even if there's a similar language, the differences in meaning, perception, and so on. So no talking. There are tables, each table of about 4 people. I think we had 4. So tables of 4, you get a rule sheet, you read over the rules, you get a deck of cards. I'm going to guess this could be played with anything, but cards are pretty easy. So you get a deck of cards, you got 4 people, you got your rules, you're not allowed to talk. Everybody reads the rules, you turn the rules in so you can commence game play. A few hands in, you, almost like musical chairs, 1 person from each table will get up, and then you rotate around. So now the tables of 4 are tables of 3 original and 1 new player. Players sit down at their new tables and gameplay continues. probably 30 seconds later, everybody begins to panic or become confused or maybe start laughing. Everybody's a little bit different. Here's the deal. The rules at each table are different, but you don't know that. You assume, as we always do, that everybody is playing the same game we are. You're starting to see that cultural significance, I think. So when you visit a place that has a different culture, language, different customs, all that, different rules, you visit that place. If you assume they're playing the same, or you're playing the same game they're playing the same game you are, you may find yourself surprised fairly quickly. There are countless examples of, especially American tourists visiting other places. If you're not used to, and this can also apply in our own, domestic visits to different places. You visit a different culture. It can be a different country. It can be different anywhere where people have different expectations, different social norms, etc. So once everybody discovers that the games are all different, the rules are like, what are you doing? This is not, you're supposed to do that. Yeah, it's sort of comical. The no talking rule basically removes any sort of negotiation or informative hints like, oh, hey, welcome to our table. Deuces are wild. You can't do that. So you find it out practically rather than through information. Nowadays, you can, somebody can tell you, hey, when you go to Saudi Arabia, don't sit cross-legged and show the bottom of your shoes. That's considered offensive. You can know that ahead of time rather than finding out the hard way. So similarly, if you do your research and you find out what social norms are for during the class, one of the examples was if you are in some countries and you say we're meeting at 5 p.m., that might mean 6 p.m. That might mean the example he gave, I remember it as though it were yesterday. He said if you're having a meeting in a place like Mexico, I think he said, you may be on time. You're sitting at the table in a restaurant or wherever you're meeting, and you see the person you're meeting with come into the restaurant, but he maybe it's an outdoor seating arrangement, or there's the dining area with many people, and it's in the evening. Hopefully the temperatures are cooling off if it's in the summer by this time, although at 5 o'clock, not really. Maybe more like 8 o'clock p.m. So he said, you may see the person you're supposed to meet with, and you look at your watch and you say, well, it's already 5 past, but you see the person talking to people and making his way or her way to your table. And they're hey, how's it going? They're talking because in this culture, it's more important to be a little bit festive, a little bit friendly, and being on time is not the priority. In a circumstance like this, a little bit more relaxed. So, but if you're sitting at your table thinking, "What? I was on time. What's going on here?" It just depends on what it really means to have a meeting at a particular time and what you do when you get there. Where are your priorities? It's more important to talk to the people I know in my community who I run into at this restaurant. And if you don't know that, you may be offended in some way. So it can be tricky. It was an interesting day. There were a lot of, there are just substantial differences in expectations and social norms and how we communicate them, which is an interesting practical lesson you can learn by playing cards with unknown or uncommonly known, not known commonly. No. If everybody has different rules, but they don't know it, you can learn a very practical lesson, which we did. Now about that elephant, if you're not familiar, like I said, some number of blind people, I think blindness is an effective circumstance here for the parable itself. Not picking on anyone in particular, but the notion is this: they have never encountered an elephant before, so they each, I guess, they become aware of a large presence. So each grabs a different part to determine what it is. You feel a leg, you feel the trunk, you feel the tail, the tusk, if there is one. Everybody comes away with a different perception of what this giant beast might be. And if you only sample a little piece without knowing the whole, you come away with a very different impression, right? If you only felt an elephant trunk versus an elephant tail, you would have very different ideas. So it's sort of similar to Barnga when you think about it. You don't have complete awareness of the common experiences. So someone checking out the tail or checking out a leg is effectively playing a different game or different rules. Same animal, same deck of cards, but playing different rules, playing by different rules when they're trying to figure out what's going on. So if you are unable to communicate, if you don't have the language to communicate, say the people involved here don't all speak the same language, so they have to wing it. So if we can't communicate our perceptions and assess their similarities and differences, we may each retain our own view despite the problems this may cause. So, someone may feel the tusk is a dangerous, it could be a dangerous part of this animal. It may conjure an image, a mental image of an armored beast of some sort. And someone who feels the leg would say, this thing is huge, which is also true. The tail might conjure some notion that this is a very weird and lithe animal. It's very thin and floppy. And the trunk might conjure an image of like a snake. So everybody would have a slightly different thing. If you're unable to compare notes, if you don't have the language or the wherewithal, you may assume, oh, I know what's going on here. I felt enough of the animal, so I know what it is. But if you don't know that, just like the Barnga game, you may find out later. And if you don't have a practical scenario to test whether you have common awareness, whether you are all on the same page, on the same elephant, then you'll find out eventually, depending on how you move forward with your newly found awareness of this strange animal. So Barnga takes this notion further by introducing the action of interactive gameplay with the cards, and then it brings the perception disparity to the fore by having people switch. And then they find out because they're actually playing different games right there in person. This is more common than we think. It actually happens all the time, between everyone, everywhere. Doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if you're speaking the same language. That can even cause greater problems because you are assuming that you are speaking the same language. But it turns out, the saying about England and the United States, it's two countries separated by a common language. So we both speak English, but do we? And then cultural norms and so on are all different. So it's more common, and it's something to be aware of. The sense of understanding that we think we have, the perceived understanding, may be very different than the actual understanding. And if you assume, and this gets really tricky if you don't verify. So if you say, let me think of put that out. You point at something, you say, put that out. Say the person's smoking, but they have something else in their hand. Does this mean put it outside? Does it mean extinguish? Is it something else? So each might have a different perception. And if both sides don't sort of check, like, no, I meant this, or what did you mean by that? Some sort of a follow-up communications to clarify, do some error checking and correcting. Without that, you end up with confusion, and you may actually, and this happens all the time between project teams. It happens when your marketing team, and I've talked about this before, marketing and design or the engineering product development. So the marketing people have a notion of what they're going to try to describe to the world, and the development team has a notion of what they're going to try to make for the world. And I talked about the ERS versus the MRD. This was back in my Apple days. So the marketing requirements document and the engineering requirements specification. I guess document is more casual. That doesn't sound so strict, whereas a specification you would think would be strict because it has to match up eventually. Here's what we're trying to build. Here's what people are being told we are trying to build. And you can look at examples like Humane or Rabbit, and you can find that the marketing was very different than the reality. And that can cause real problems. That can cause lots and lots of money to go swirling down a drain. Thank you, Coriolis effect. So it does matter. And it can really matter if you are in a tense situation. You're evacuating a building on fire, or an airplane that's just crashed, or you're in a hospital in an emergency room situation. You are doing anything that requires fast action where there are actual consequences to miscommunication. Obviously, this doesn't happen every day, but it could. And if you're in emergency services, Department of Public Safety, similar, it may actually happen every day. So you establish communication protocols. Some people will say it really came down to the training. You train what to do so that you're not stuck miscommunicating. You're not stuck using the wrong word, the wrong term, confusing meanings. There's a famous story, which is true, which I will leave to you to look up. It is true, though. There was a Martian. It was a human probe, Earth probe. It was sent to Mars. The probe was supposed to land on Mars, but unfortunately, it crashed on Mars. Cost lots and lots of money. What happened was some of the project teams, everything from system design to construction to launch to mission planning, some were using metric meters, some were using imperial units, American units, feet, yards, pounds, kilograms, the whole nine, right? So if one group is using metric numbers, but they are not careful with their units, that is to say, they're assuming 3. They're not saying 3 kilograms. And the other team is assuming 3. Okay, 3 pounds. Well, 3 pounds is not 3 kilograms. It's 2.2 pounds per kilogram, right? So you're going to have to multiply. So it's 6.6 pounds or 3 kilograms. So the number 3 without the units attached would have a different meaning if each side of this card game similarity, or if the elephant in the room is your mission and you're not all using the same units. So this actually happened. And the actual cause was communication. It was different tools and methods, not shared, not everybody being on the same page. So this can happen, and it can be very expensive. In, of course, the worst cases, you end up with things like the 737 MAX, where the flight crews of some aircraft are not aware of the MCAS system. They don't know what it's doing and what it's not doing and how to disable it and how to prevent it from steering you directly into the ground. So lack of communication, or a lack of common basis of communication, can really cause damage, and worse. Or in the best cases, it just causes confusion and maybe a little bit of frustration, and ideally some iteration where you go back and revisit, like, okay, we're not playing the same card game here. Let's try to figure out what the rules are so that we can play the game and not try to figure out the rules. Like, let's get that off the table or done, and then we can move on. So this actually applies to Project ACT, so the Autonomous Cohort Tessellation. If you have not listened to previous episodes where I go into what this is, the notion is there are people, in some cases, former Code for America brigades, in other cases, people that just want to work on civic volunteer projects. In specific cases of that, it may be individuals. Well, it may be individuals anywhere. If you are in a place, in a locality where there are too few people who either want to participate or want to continue participating, if they were in a brigade formerly from Code for America. So if you are in a place where you are by yourself, or you don't know of other people near you, it's a little bit tricky to work solo. So it'd be nice to be able to connect to other groups, other individuals. So that's the tessellation. Project ACT was initially the Autonomous Cohort Transformation, which was going to be before the brigade program of Sunset, to help brigades that wanted to take a path similar to what the Innovate for Vegas Foundation did, which was to form their own, that's us, form our own nonprofit entity to pursue a 501c3 determination, which we received, of course, with the IRS, and to be a standalone, autonomous cohort working on projects. So helping others do the same or similar was the initial goal of Project ACT, and it's still on the list. But another T word, tessellation, which is a mosaic. So now if you can imagine a visualization of a group or individual logos or profile pictures or avatars or something, if you can plot those on a map like a mosaic, you can see, oh, there are more than just me doing these projects or this interest, this focus area. Now, not everybody's working on the same projects. What are you working on? The notion that you can advertise the projects you're working on, they're civic volunteer projects, and what they're trying to accomplish, making that discoverable means you can now discover others who may be working on something similar. So if we can enable this discovery and then connection process, that's the first step, I think, in enabling communication and collaboration. So I use the communication word. So right away, there's potential for miscommunication. So a large scale project, even starting small, but inviting people from far and wide to participate and contribute. This is similar to the Linux kernel, for example. Back in 1993, I believe it was, basically a post on a Usenet news group. Hey, it was on Minix news group, I think. Linus Torvalds posts and say, hey, I'm working on this thing. So when you invite people from far and wide, and he was he in Finland? I think it's Finland, right? He was home in his home country. So he was posting for the world. So anyone from any culture and whatnot. If I remember correctly, there was some concern about how much documentation was available, what the plan was, how to contribute, best practices, tools, methods, etc. So be careful what you wish for when you cast a wide net, because different people have, some people want to roll up their sleeves and jump in. Some people want to see a spec. Some people want to have a say in the spec. Some people don't want to have a say in the spec. Just tell me what you want and I will work on the part that interests me. Some people want to steer. Some people want to work the accelerator. So everybody's a little bit different, and it may be cultural or maybe individual culture. So being aware of that going in is important. Being reminded of that every once in a while, also important. So all involved have to know it's an elephant and what they all have to know the rules of the card game, and that they can use the tools and words to communicate along the way is important. And if they don't, and here's the thing. So when I was in high school, I was an ROTC. I was an Air Force Junior ROTC. One of our NCO instructors, non-commissioned officer, he was I cannot remember what Sergeant E pay grade, but he was several years retired, separated. He worked in the hypobaric chamber at Williams Air Force Base, training pilots for what to do when you're at altitude and your oxygen equipment fails. So you're no longer getting the proper mixture and levels of breathable air. It's not, oxygen, nitrogen, proper air. So if your equipment fails, or if there's a problem in some way, mask problem, flow, you have to recognize that you are now experiencing hypoxia. You have a shortage of the gases you need to continue to be awake and aware, and you will begin to experience these hypoxic symptoms. So anyone can tell you what they are, but when you feel them, and in the hypobaric chamber, there would be simple games like placing the square pegs in the round holes. You could do that all day, but once you're at 35,000 feet, take off your mask, which was one of their exercises. Each would watch their colleague, the person in the hot seat without enough air. They would watch their functionality diminish very rapidly. Like they're suddenly not able to put the peg in the hole. They're not able to operate a control. They're not able to read a value. They're not able to speak or communicate effectively. So each would watch their colleagues go through this and experience it themselves, of course. The take home, now you can be told what could happen when you actually experience the lack of air, the hypoxia, and so the lack of oxygen but it's not pure oxygen, just so you know. You're aware of that, I hope. So when you're experiencing hypoxia, which is literally just a shortage of air, there's histotoxic hypoxia when you have a gas, like maybe you have too much carbon dioxide that is preventing oxygen, normal air. So you're blocking oxygen uptake in your blood, and your hemoglobin is saturated with CO2. So, or maybe more likely carbon monoxide, car exhaust, for example. So histotoxic, different. Hypoxia, you're just running out of air. So you really don't, there's nothing that you don't smell. The smell of car exhaust, you don't smell any sort of strange, there's no additive in your methane, so you can smell it. You're just low on air. So you have to learn how to recognize this. Similarly, if you're working on a project and you invite people from other cultures, whether it's down the street or around the world, they have different expectations than you. They may hope for more concise documentation up front. They may want to participate in an agile user story exercise to develop a product that will work. Maybe the people that they are interested in building something for, their communities around them, maybe they have some requirements or some interests or some particular gaps to fill. So the ability to add user stories to an epic, or to basically fill in some of the features or tackle some of the particular implementation details, would be interesting. So some people would like to be in that process, participate. Some people would rather do the work and not worry about the specification. All kinds, takes all kinds. So knowing up front, having a reasonable, and this was Linus Torvalds Linux. He used to call it Linux, but when he moved to America, somewhere there's a mention of this, and probably a whole entire article about how he began to change his name to, I believe his normal pronunciation was Linus. So he pronounced his kernel Linux. But then when he moved to America, he preferred Linux, although I think he goes by Linus Torvalds instead of Linus. But Linux kernel is more common anyway. So when you started the project, there was that disconnect. Like, how are we supposed to join in this? What do we do? What are the expectations? So there were a lot of questions, if I'm remembering correctly, and I believe I am. So that is bound to happen in the Project Act scheme. Now, one of the things that we want to implement as people sort of jump on board with this decentralized discovery connection process, once you can connect, and once you know about each other, right? Like, it's almost like the aliens in the universe, discovering that there are others is a good first step, but then you want to communicate in some way. And one of the points of communication is, hey, here's a project that we are working on. It may be similar to something you are working on or are interested in working on. So that's a point of communication and collaboration. Or could be both. Here's our project, and we have some issues. We have some user stories to implement. We have some features. We're kind of stuck. Maybe we have a few issues marked as help wanted, which is a common sort of ad hoc practice people do on GitHub, possibly on GitLab or BitKeeper elsewhere. So if you can tag issues in some way, or whatever your issue tracking tools are, that this is open for contribution, you're looking for others maybe outside of your organization. So discovering those is going to be a part of what Project Act's tessellation will hope to accomplish. Hey, I'm a civic volunteer. I have some spare time on my hands. I have these areas of expertise. I know how to do this and that. I'm a great Lisp programmer. I am totally down with CouchDB. Maybe I'm assembly language programmer. I program 96,000 series DSPs, and you do a quick search and you find of the participating individuals and organizations with projects that have opted into this discovery network. So it's decentralized. You don't really have to join. You enter the web, the social graph, the network of organizations that know each other, like your friends. So you say, does anyone need a 96,000 DSP coding or some CouchDB, NoSQL, data modeling, implementation? Anybody need some Lisp? And you might find actual issues that are open. Like, oh, look, I can actually help this project. So you may say, oh, it's a Friday. I'm going to do a couple of hours towards somebody else's project and kind of, help out with my skills and my interests and the abilities I have and my background and so on. I'm going to apply that somewhere else. And this may actually be just the thing that some project needs, is someone with this specific expertise and a willingness to apply it. So normally, if you want to try to discover that, good luck. So the basis of Project ACT, the starting point, is connecting civic volunteer individuals and organizations, probably former brigades to start, but you don't need to form a brigade. You don't need to be a 501c3 nonprofit. You don't need to be a fiscally sponsored entity with a memorandum of understanding with the Code for America Labs. And you don't need all these things. You just are willing to participate in this network, a decentralized network. So the approach that we're taking is just like an RSS feed. If you publish a blog or some other content, you have a news website, you have a personal blog, you have a podcast, even YouTube publishes an RSS feed of a channel. I think you can disable that if you want. So if you want people to subscribe to your YouTube channel or your blog or your podcast or your news website or some various other things, you can just create an RSS file. RSS version 1 was RDF site summary. RSS 2.0 is really simple syndication, became XML, whatever. The point is, you can become a part of the blogosphere. You can be a podcast publisher by publishing the RSS description, the file that here are my most recent podcast episodes. Here are the last 20. Here are my last 50 blog posts, etc. You publish what you want in this accepted format, and then you go to an index website, or you publish on Spotify, or you go to Podcast Index, or you go to Feed. What is it? It's not Feedly. Is it Feedly? No, I can't remember. There's an activity pub centric feed index now. I can't remember what it is. Feedly? Let me check. Hang on. Feedle. FEEDLE.world. Feedle.world. So if you appear in one index, you're publishing your podcast on Spotify. So if the feed is accessible in a public place and using the normal discovery methods, which you don't really need to worry about, then other indexes, other podcast platforms will almost certainly add your podcast, your blog, your whatever, to their index so that other people will find it. So this spreads out discoverability of your feed, of your content, in a sort of decentralized and very communal way, so that you really don't have to sign up for anything. You have to sign up sometimes for your Spotify or iTunes or whatever. So the notion that we're pursuing with Project ACT is if you have a website or if you have a GitHub account or a GitLab account, if you are able to to create and store a FOF, friend of a friend, file that describes you or your organization, and then indicate other organizations that you know. So you may be friends, Innovate for Vegas Foundation may be friends with Project ACT. So we connect to each other this way. It's we're members of a group, we're friends. We're probably members of a group makes more sense. So the group, the Tessellation group, members, Project ACT, Innovate for Vegas Foundation. Now, if someone else were to index the FOF for Project ACT or Innovate for Vegas, they would see these two groups and they may say, oh, can you add us? Or they may just add Project ACT and Innovate for Vegas Foundation to their FOF, maybe Open Fresno, maybe Hack for LA, maybe Code for America. So if their friend of a friend says, oh, we are a member of this group, with these other members, we're friends, right? You can indicate knows, I think it is. The FOF, is it knows? Oh, you can specify a relationship, but I think it's just knows or a friend or something. I can't remember. I'm not looking at the spec right now, the vocabulary. But you very simply indicate the relationship between entities. So you can be an agent, you can be a person, you can be an organization, and you know each other. There you go. You didn't have to fill out any documents. You didn't have to add another password to your password manager. You just edited a file. Then when you have a project you'd like to advertise, you create a description of a project file, and these end up being similar to RSS, right? Except they just don't change as often. So you publish your description of a project, which is a description of the project, a name, short description, long description. You can localize them to different languages. You can point to if you have a repo, a repository online. So you can have a Git repository. It could be on GitHub or GitLab or wherever. If you're using SVN, Subversion, if you're using another repository, there are a few different ways to do that. You can indicate a project homepage. You can indicate a project mailing list, a project database. You can put links to all these things explicitly. And then now that we know, so the project act maybe has a spider that will go and, here are all the members of the tessellation group. Let's visit their homepage. Let's find their project. Let's find their projects. So, you have 5 projects. So let's look at your description of a project. Let's get the descriptions and so on. We can catalog those. And then eventually, let's look at your bug database and see what issues you have publicly visible. So we're not doing anything sneaky here. Here are the publicly visible issues, bugs, tasks, things to do, backlog. Here are things that you have that are open that maybe they're marked help wanted. Let's catalog those. Now the person with some free time on Friday can say, are there any projects with my 96,000 series DSP and Lisp and CouchDB? Any combination of those. And I may be able to pull up this would be unusual probably, 96,000 hasn't been around for a while. Lisp and Couch, more likely. But you may find some open issues on some projects that are aligned with civic volunteer efforts in different parts of the country, and they may be specifically aligned with your skill set and your desire to contribute. Bam. So connection, communication, and collaboration. But it's the communication part. So now you may say, I can help you with this bug. And you may flip through what they got, what their specs or what their user stories, what their different ways of describing what they want to accomplish. And you may say, I'm not really sure what they're trying to accomplish here. So you can try to ask some questions. And here's where it becomes important that everybody understands the motivation, the goal. So this is probably going to be the most challenging part. The connection part can be done through automation. Keep it very simple. But it's what you do when you discover, hey, there's a thing that interests me that I could probably help with. That is where everything I've talked about today comes into play. So connection is that first hurdle. If we can discover and connect, just having a database that is not a human updated spreadsheet, but an actual indexable, searchable, queryable database catalog of organizations and projects and interrelations that we can start indexing issues that may be in search of attention, assistance, collaborative input. How do we discover and catalog individuals and groups and civic volunteers? This is something that can be done. There are existing tools and methods. So it's a great starting point, but it's also a great test to get the process itself working with those existing tools and methods. And then what happens next? The rules of the card game are established. If everybody is familiar with them, create a file, put it here, include this information, etc. If the elephant can at least be known, like, hey, everybody, this is an elephant. Everybody, yeah, elephant. So we don't spend time discussing, what is this, a leg or a trunk? What is a trunk? Right? So if you can set the common ground on which to base communication and collaboration, my hope is that Project ACT will enable productivity, will enable progress to be made, maybe with individuals that don't have a team of people with particular skills that help to advance the cause address an issue like, hey, I'm not an expert in React. I really need someone to help me with some React. Does anybody want to help with some React? So someone who's got some spare time and is a React programmer may say, I'm looking for somebody who needs help with React. If we can put those people together, if they can communicate in useful ways across their various, familiarity, culture, language. Do I know what your project is? Do I know what you need? Yeah, there's all sorts of things that become human interaction. So we'll see where that goes. So that's something to think about moving forward. I think I'll have to get everybody to play Barn Guy at least once, or find an elephant. So that's that. So we're going to file our annual list on Sunday and get on with year 3. So let's see how all these things work. And absolutely need to update our website and get My Muni going, which is probably the more interesting project, but My Muni and Welcome, which is a sister project, different side of the same coin. If we can get other people from other places to collaborate, or to at least recognize the potential utility, then we may have more than 1 or 2 people working on it, and we can demonstrate practically the value proposition that Project Act brings to the table, but no talking. And that is the end of this episode of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. Thank you for listening, and visit our website, innovateforvegas.org, or our GitHub organization, github.com/innovateforvegas. Remember, it's FOR. There's no spaces or dashes, so Innovate for, FOR Vegas, VEGAS, Innovate for Vegas. Check us out, see what's up. And if you'd like to support us, we are a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. Consult your tax professionals, tax preparation, or otherwise experts that will tell you whether you can deduct any financial support you send our way. Luckily, our expenses are very small, but if we got big plans, so we'll see where that goes. Thank you, as always, for listening. Happy new fiscal year come Monday. Cheers.